Well, back in the summer of 1968, the Olympics were held in Mexico City. And that year, one of the long jumpers was an American jumper who, at the age of 15 years old, had jumped over 24 feet. Now 22 years old, he found himself in the Olympics against two of the greatest long jumpers of all time, two guys who had both earned a gold medal in this exact event. In the qualifying round, the man actually stepped on the line twice, just qualifying those jumps. Finally, on the third and final jump, he actually had a jump that was legal, which brought him into the finals. And so he got to the finals. It came to his very first jump. He stepped to the line. He took a deep breath, and this is what took place. The man's name, Bob Beamon. His jump, 29 feet, 2.5 inches. Get this, it was almost 2 feet further than any jump in the history of the sport. It was so much further that he actually jumped past the measuring instruments, and so they needed to measure his jump manually, taking over 20 minutes to do so. It was so much further that 23 years is how long his record stood, and even further that even yet today, 51 years later, this jump still holds the Olympic record yet today. And only one man on one jump has ever jumped further. After this jump, one long jumper came up to him and actually told him that he had ruined the sport. He'd ruined the sport because he set the bar so high. Crazy, right? This week, the nerd in me had to. I took out a tape measure and I measured out 29 feet. A few of the staff attempted to make a jump. I'm not going to share how far people jumped. It was embarrassing, but we love stories like this, don't we? Stories of people who go further. Stories of people who push the envelope and they go further in sports, further in business, further in creativity, further in life. But for all of us here today, what does it look like for us to go further in our relationship with Jesus? What does it look like for us to go further in our walk with Christ? I'm just guessing that most of us here who consider ourselves Christians, we love Jesus. Quick side note, if that's not you, if you're on the fence about God, you're not still really sure what to think about Jesus, know we're thrilled you're here. You do not have to believe the same things we believe to belong here. But for those of us who do follow Jesus, I'm guessing that most of us would say, I want to go further in my relationship with Christ. Absolutely, right? It's like, of course, that's why I'm in church. I want to go further in my relationship with Christ, but I either don't know how or there's something that's holding me back from doing so. And today we could talk about so many different things that hold us back from keeping us going further in our relationship with God. But there's one specific thing that God and Jesus brought up time and time again that for so many different reasons we hesitate to talk about. And for so many different reasons we hesitate to actually take the step that will bring us further. Now, before we continue on, I just want to say welcome. My name is Adam. I'm one of the pastors here. Wherever you are, wherever you're joining us from, in person, online, at one of our campuses, network churches, if you're listening on iTunes or YouTube, wherever you are, I want to say a huge welcome to you. Today, we're starting up this brand new series called Further. Again, talking about going further in our relationship with God. At one point, God came to a man named Solomon, and God told Solomon he could ask for anything he wanted, and it would be given to him in full. And so Solomon, he's much wiser than myself. He asked for the gift of wisdom. I would have asked for a bunch of other things, but he asked for wisdom, and God gave it to him fully. And as a result, Solomon would end up becoming a great king. As a result, Solomon would end up writing a large portion of what we know as the Psalms. He wrote a couple other books of the Bible as well, but Solomon is probably most widely known for writing the book that we call Proverbs. And Proverbs is really a collection of practical advice and wisdom, advice on your relationships, advice on how to use your time, advice on how to live a good and fulfilling life, and really advice on how to go further in your relationship with God. And so to start off this series today, I just want to look at two simple verses, two simple lines from this wise man named Solomon. And to start, I just want to actually look at three words. This is how Solomon starts out. Listen to this. Solomon simply says, honor the Lord. Honor the Lord. Do you want to live a good and fulfilling life? Do you want to go further in your relationship with God? Solomon tells us to honor him. Honor him. What does honor mean? Honor means to show great respect to. More specifically, honor means to add weight to something or someone. And so just to explain a little bit about what honor means and how we do this in our relationships with others, we honor people with our time. We'll have a certain person that really matters to us. And so they're really, really important. And so we make time for them in our schedules. That person carries weight with us. And so when it comes to our schedule, if we already have our schedule set, we'll actually move around our schedule around that person. Again, they're so important and we want to honor them. We honor other people with our words. We'll be talking about someone with a friend, and we share about all the awesome things that we love about this person. We share about their accomplishments. We don't tear that person down. Instead, when we're talking about them, we share all the characteristics that we love and appreciate about them. And as we're doing so, we're adding weight to them, and we are honoring them. Solomon, he tells us to honor God, to honor him, to give God great respect. Solomon says this is so important, to add weight to who God is, make it crystal clear that he is the most important person to you. Again, honor him. Now, one quick thing about honor, there's a huge difference between submitting to someone and honoring them. A huge difference between obeying a master and saying all the right things for your angry, uptight boss because you feel like you have to, otherwise they'll be angry and even more uptight, compared to wanting to honor a person. Why? Because of who they are. Because of how much you respect them. Because of the great genuine respect that you have for that person. We submit to an angry boss, we don't honor them. Just to say it, so many of us view God as an angry boss, don't we? He's got all kinds of rules. And he's really uptight, and if you screw up one time, well, then you're bad, you know? And if you do this and you don't do that, well, then you just suck at everything. Solomon doesn't say that at all. Instead, he says, honor God. Honor God. Now, I can tell you all the reasons that all of you should honor God, but I can't force you to honor him. The moment I did, it would cease to be honor. I can tell you why you should, but I can't force you to do so. And so for me, why do I want to honor God? Because he's faithful. He's faithful. And that's not something I'm just sharing from a Bible verse. Instead, every time I've screwed up in my life, he's taken me back time and time and time again. He's been so faithful. Every time I've had a need, every single time, somehow, some way, God has provided for me. Not always in the ways that I hoped, not always in the ways that I prayed for, but every single time, God has been faithful, and because of it, I want to honor him. Why do I want to honor him? Because he's an amazing creator. A few days ago, Becky and I and the kids, we went to see my parents in Arizona, and some of the sunsets at night, not to mention the 70-degree weather. Dear God, thank you so much. You're an amazing creator. Why do I want to honor God? Because he's all powerful. He's all knowing. Why do I want to honor him? Because he's unchanging. Why do I want to honor him? Because there is no one greater. And one of my favorite worship songs that we sing, my favorite line is where it says, you have no rival, you have no equal. Every time I hear that, it's like, God, this is so true about you. I can't sing it loud enough without anybody telling me I should. It's like I can't raise my hands high enough because I just want to honor you. No one is forcing me. I want to honor God. Why? Because I love him. Why? Because he's rescued me from my crap. Why? Because he's my only hope. He's my only peace. Why? Because he's done so many good things for me when I haven't been good. Why? Because he's so patient with me. And so no one's telling me I need to honor him. Again, it would cease to be if someone forced me. Instead, I want to honor him. I can tell you why, but I can't force you to do so. And once again, our brother Solomon, he just says, do you want to live a good and fulfilling life? Do you want to go further in your relationship with God? Honor him. Just honor him. And so this is what Solomon starts out by saying, and this is great, right? But now we come to the part of things, like as I mentioned, that we kind of hesitate to talk about. And yet it's so important to do so. Like if we truly want to grow and go further in our relationship with Christ, it's so important. And in years past, just to almost confess, in years past on something like this, I would have danced around it because I didn't want to talk about it. Now I regret for doing so. Why? Because it's so important. And even further, hear this from the depth of my soul, it's so good for us. It's so good for us. And so again, listen, Solomon, he starts by saying, honor the Lord. And then here's the hard part. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of everything you produce. Again, honor him. And we can honor God with our words. We can honor God with our singing. We can honor God when we love another person like Jesus would want us to love him. Absolutely. But Solomon specifically tells us to honor him with our wealth and our money. Why? Because God knows that our money controls us. And oftentimes we find our security in our money, and we find our happiness in our money, and we find our peace and our joy and just all things, we find it in our money. And so when we give God our money, is what we're saying is, God, I want to find these things in you. I want to find it in you. I want to find this in you. When we give God our money, what we're saying is, God, everything I have comes from you. What we're saying is, God, I love you so much, and I'm tired of just saying it with my words and checking a box on Sunday and then going back. Instead, I want to show you that I love you with everything, including the most important things to me, which I'm embarrassed to say it is my money. As a way of honoring God. When we give him our money, what we're declaring is we're saying, God, you carry weight. You carry weight in my life. And I'm not being forced, I want to honor you with everything I have, including my money. And so Solomon tells us to honor God with our money, but he goes one step further and he gets specific, and he tells us to give our first and our best. Our first and our best. Not just our money, but our first and our best. What does that mean? Well, one of the things that you'll find and you'll see all throughout the story of God, from Solomon to Jesus, is this challenge. You take a first tenth, you maybe heard it used as the churchy word is tithe, of what you have. Take the first fruits of your produce, basically the first fruits, the first 10% of your income, and give it back to God. Not the last part that's left over, if there is some left over, not the bad part that you really don't want in the first place, and so it's kind of easy to give, but your first and your best. Again, give it back to God as a way of honoring him. Now, just a quick side note, if you've heard about tithing in church, there's a high chance that there's also been a huge guilt trip like dumped right on top of it, right? And you should, and there's rules and all kinds of rules. Or you've seen the person who does tithe, and how you know they tithe is because they talk about tithing to everyone in the world. The only thing worse is CrossFitters. It's like, okay, I get that, cool story. It's like, they're really proud and like, oh, okay, it's awesome. I don't know if I should give you a high five. I don't know what to do. Just to say it, both of these things can't be any further from the heart of God. And they don't bring us any further in our relationship with him. Get this, I could tithe for the rest of my life pre-tax. For the rest of my life, and if I did so because I felt like I needed to, because God, he's got a bunch of rules, or if I felt like I should so I can be proud and boast about it, our God, he would say, that's so nice, but please keep your money. Because I don't want your money, and I definitely don't need it. Like super religious person that's perfect, here's a gold star or something. Like, I don't know, like it's a scratch and sniff sticker, but you're not going any further with me. Keep it. And so Solomon tells us to honor the Lord because we love and respect him with our first and our best. But Solomon goes on to say more, and this is the good stuff. Listen to what he goes on to say. Again, honor the Lord with your wealth and the first fruits of everything you produce, then your barns will be filled and overflowing, and your jars will brim over with new wine. Again, in case we missed it, Solomon is telling us to honor God, to bring him our first and our best, and then what? Then our barns will be empty. Bring God your first and your best, then what's going to happen? Then your jars are going to be really dried up. Bring God your first and your best, then you're not going to have as much, then you're not going to have quite as much as you had before you did so. No, that's not what it says. Just really hear this. Really just hear this. Then your barns will be filled and overflowing, and your jars will brim over with new wine. Just to say it, this is crazy. Nonsense. My 5-year-old would say, no, that's not true. Like that's actually not true. Like, no, it doesn't. No, you'll have less. Your barns will be less filled. Years ago, though, I'll never forget a friend of mine. We were talking about giving and tithing and generosity, and from his own experience in life, he said something I'll never forget. He said the 90% always goes further than the 100. 90% will always go further than the 100. He just said, Adam, the 90 always goes further than the 100. It was just like, then your barns will be filled and overflowing, and your jars will brim over with new wine. When we give back to God, the 90, it makes no sense, but it somehow goes further than the 100. This week I'm like, okay, how do I show this? Okay, that's great. How do I show this? And so I tried to think about it this way. If you had 2 jars, one that was 90% full, one that was 100% full, at face value, everyone's going to say, this is going to go further. I mean, there's more. This is really, really easy. And my 5-year-old would say, I want this one. There's more in there. Absolutely. This is going to go further. But when we keep the 100 to ourselves, what we fail to see in this is we fail to see that there is a cap now on our jar. What we fail to see is there's a cap now on our lives, you could say. Why? Because with the 100, and when it's just you, it's just you. And so your jar, it might appear like there's more, and it's actually actually, it's just you, and it's kind of limited to what you can do and what you're able to do, and which, just side note, is very, very little. And there's no room for anything or anyone else but you, but you've got your 100, and yet there is a cap that you don't see. Well, on the other hand, again, this jar, it's 90% full. It's going to go less further than this. It's clearly less, it's not as much as this, until we realize that with this, it leaves room. And who does it leave room for? It leaves room for God. And it leaves room for trusting him. And it leaves room for what he can do. And it's no longer limited just on what we can do. It's limited by what God can do. And maybe you've never heard this. God is unlimited. And so what we do when we do this is we say, God, I'm leaving room for you. Here's my first and my best. I've given that to you. I'm leaving room to trust you. I'm leaving room for you to show up. I'm leaving room for you to go further. I'm bringing my first and my best to you as a way of honoring you. Now, when we do this, copyright infringement, it's not my words, it's Solomon. I'm taking his words. When we honor the Lord and we bring our first and our best, Solomon, again, this isn't my words, Solomon, he tells us then our barns will be filled and overflowing. You could say it this way. You could say our jars will brim over with new wine. And speaking of wine, does anyone like wine? I'm just kidding. Anyways. You could say it this way, though. When all of a sudden we leave room for God, all of a sudden the 90 goes further than the 100. And God's like, you begin to invite me in the equation, and all of a sudden I'm beginning to show up in ways you can't explain. I'm gonna begin to overflow your life. To be clear, it doesn't always mean more money. Sometimes does it mean more money? Yeah, sure, maybe. This isn't prosperity gospel though, but every single time, it may not result in more money, but every single time it results in more joy, more peace, more purpose. Every single time it results in more and more and more of him, because we're saying, God, I no longer want it my way. Instead, I want it your way. And so I'm bringing my first and my best as a way to honor you. You carry weight in my life, so here is yours. And then God, he does his part, and he said, I don't know if you can explain this or not. You're gonna need to do something like this, but then your barns will be filled and overflowing. I can't explain it. And your jars will brim over with new wine. Again, my friend, when he said that, I was like, it's something I'll never forget. The 90 goes further than the 100. Why? Because for time and time and time and time again, it's been true in my life. After 15 years of giving to God, I'm gonna take the 90 every single time. Every time. Why? Because with me, it's limited. With me, I'm the control freak. With me, I'm trusting in myself, and I should never trust in myself. With the 90, it's like, God, I want more of you. I want more of your wisdom. I want more of your advice, your peace, your joy. I want it to overflow in my life. Every time. I mean, you couldn't convince me. There's been times it hasn't been easy. There's been times when there's been a surprise bill that we've had we didn't expect. Every single time. It's like, God, every single time I'm choosing you. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing you. This past week, I grabbed coffee with one of my closest friends, a brother of mine that I've looked up to for years, a guy that's probably 10 or so years older than me that might, hopefully he's not hearing that, I think 10 years. And so we got together, and he's just a guy that I feel like I can just share, and I pray the same is true, vice versa. And so we talked about family, and we talked about work and marriage and kids, and I said, can I ask a random question? Can I ask it? It was totally, I just felt like I was supposed to say it. I was like, can I ask how you're doing with joy and purpose in your life? And he just laughed, and he's like, what? And I said, yeah, again, you don't have to answer, like, how are you doing with joy and purpose in your life? He's like, it's crazy that you asked that. He's like, my life is so good. A note about my friend, everything he seems to touch just goes well, like every area, just up and to the right. And he's like, my life is so good, and yet I'm really struggling with this joy and purpose in my life. And then he said, just out of nowhere, he said, it's like I want to go further in my relationship with God, his word, not mine. I want to go further in my relationship with God, but it just feels like there's something that's holding me back. Like I want to go further, but when it comes down to actually making decisions, then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not really sure I want to go further. Like that kind of sounds good. And he's like, I'm great in some areas, but not in other areas. And it's holding me back. I had no clue what he was going to say. I said, no, again, none of my business. Is it like a group of things, or is it like one thing that's holding you back? No joke, I expected him to say something like pornography. Or I expected him to say I'm doing some decisions at work that aren't right, like I'm kind of cutting corners. Like I didn't know what he was going to say. Instead, so I asked my question, is there something that is holding you back, or maybe a group of things? Without hesitating, he said, finances. More specifically, my money. And I was like, really? He said, for years, I've felt like God has said, hey, his name, trust me in this area. Trust me in this area. And God has provided so much for my family. God has provided so much for me, but it's the one area, it's like the one area that I just want control. It's the one area that I find security. It's like the one area that I don't want to hand over to God, and I can just tell it's holding me back. And it's like internally, I got this tug of war going on between me and God. No one's telling me about the tug of war. I'm just feeling this tug of war inside of me. I want to go further. And yet when it comes down to it, I'm not sure I really want to do so. I told my friend, I was like, oh gosh, I'm honored that you'd share that with me. And I was like, this is the most bizarre thing. I'm talking about this exact thing on Sunday. You actually stole some of my words that I was going to use on Sunday. He's like, no way. And then I took out my phone and I brought up my Bible app. And I said, would you just care if I read one verse? And he's like, no, I'd love that. And so the verse I pulled up was this one. Again, one of my closest friends. And I just said, honor the Lord with your wealth. And the first fruits of everything you produce. Then your barns will be filled and overflowing, and your jars will brim over with new wine. I told my friend, I said his first name, I want this verse so badly for you, and more than me, God, He wants you to experience this so badly. When you begin to do this, you're no longer in control, instead God is. I promise you, again, this is what I'm saying to my friend, you will be filled with joy, with peace, with purpose. God will begin to bring you farther than you ever imagined. I guess she doesn't like tithing or something. Okay. And then I said to my friend, I was like, there's no pressure, like there's no weird things with this, but I just want to challenge you to give something. Like just give something, give a percentage, give something. And I promise God will begin to move. I promise that God will take you further. He'll take you further than you ever imagined. And so today, as I share all this, there's not some weird guilt trip behind it. There's no weird pressure to do so. If you did, it wouldn't be honor. But truly from a place of wanting this for all of you, like as my friends, as my family, as people who are part of this, the same body of Christ, I want you to experience the joy of seeing this take place in your life. And so at all campuses, at network churches, whatever church you attend, I can't say this strong enough, I don't care which church you give to, wherever you're at, just wherever it is, I don't care where you're at, the challenge is simply to go further. Go further. And so at this time, you should have been given one of these cards, these two cards. The first part of the challenge is to go further. What does that mean? Figure out what you're currently given. Maybe you're like my parents. Growing up, they dropped $20 in the offering plate. They dropped $50 kind of here and there in the offering plate. Maybe it's $100 every so often. Maybe you don't give anything. Okay, great, awesome. No weirdness. Figure out what you're currently given. As an example, if I made $200 a week, and I was like, gosh, I usually drop in like a $10. Again, this is an example. If I dropped in $10, I'm already given 5%. Okay, that's awesome. Grow by 2%, grow by 6%. Go to a full tithe, awesome. Go further. Go further. What are you currently given? Figure it out. Go further, awesome. Grow in your percentage. And then on this other card, there's a place where you can just fill it out. On the one side, it says, I commit to going further by increasing my giving by 2%, 4%, 6%, 10% other. I just encourage you to fill that out. Again, do we want to go further? This is one of the ways. It's a huge step. Go further. That's the first part of the challenge. The other part of the challenge is subscribe. Subscribe to Automatic Giving. Beck and I, we've given to the Embrace since before Embrace had a name. It's just been in the last 2 years that we've been doing automatic withdrawal ourselves. Subscribe. Again, it's a simple form. Just fill it out. Do it right now. Fill it out. We subscribe to Netflix, to Hulu, right? We do most of our finances, our bills and stuff online. This is a simple way to faithfully and consistently honor God through our giving. I was thinking about it this week. We subscribe to Hulu and Netflix, and yet what has it done for us? What has God done for us? So much. In the Weber family, we do Amazon Prime. We don't bat an eye when the bill comes out. Some of you, maybe it's a car payment, a house payment. We don't bat an eye when it comes out. Again, this is a simple way to faithfully and consistently give back to God. I want to challenge you. If you're a follower of Jesus today, I really want to press you on this one. This is something I so badly needed to hear for years. Go further and subscribe. You can fill it out. At all campuses, we're going to have baskets at each of the doors. You can drop it in. Keep this chart. This chart was the best material ever for right next to your toilet. You can just sit there and daydream. If I made $6 million on a weekly basis, oh, okay, that's what it would be. All right. If I don't know why I love this little chart right here. But again, drop this in the basket when you go. Also, if you're curious or skeptical about churches or even this church, I'm so proud of how we spend our money. You can find the recent update. We just updated it online, IamEmbrace.com/give. You can see where our giving goes. Also, just to share, we did a series just recently called The Run Project. This past week, we greenlighted all kinds of Run Project. Over 40 applications have come in so far. This past week, we greenlighted thousands of dollars. Some of the ideas that are going to happen are amazing. I can't wait to share that with all of you. And so go check out our giving online. Also, just to say it, there are so many awesome things that we wish we could do. More funds to Run Projects, more funds to our kids and youth area. Right now, one of the big projects we want to green light is building our new T campus. We got the land. We're so close to being able to financially cover the bill for the weekly and consistent giving. As soon as it rises, we're going to green light that. That campus has been maxed for years. It's exploding, and yet there's no room to grow. More importantly, though, I don't know about you, but I still have people in my life who don't know Jesus. I do. People who are hurting, broken. Prayed over a man yesterday on my front porch who's addicted. And it's crazy to think that God wants to use us to reach that person. And so again, I pray today for all of us who love Jesus, who want to follow him, I pray we'd go further. Solomon, he says to honor him with what? Our first and our best. And then our barns will be filled and overflowing, and our jars will brim over. I pray we'd go further and subscribe. Let's pray. Gracious Father, Heavenly King, we come before you thankful for who you are. Thankful. God, and I'm even thankful as a pastor and also as a person that you say and you talk about some of the things that we don't like to say or talk about. And so, God, I feel like I'm preaching at myself today as well. But God, you do want us to go further. I pray for the person who's skeptical with us, the person who's skeptical who's listening to this on iTunes. God, I pray this wouldn't turn that person away from yourself, but only it would turn them towards you. For all of us, God, I pray that you'd move inside of us. I pray that we would go further, that we'd step out of our comfort zone, that we'd trust you with our first and our best, and then we'd see you fill our barns, overflow our jars. Lord, we love you. We thank you. We pray all this in the name of Jesus. Amen.